Okay, guys, here's a little something different on this channel. I'm going to ask a question, and I'm sure it's been asked many times before in the last few years, but is ufology dead? I mean, is the interest in UFOs, both by researchers and by the public, is it dead? Um, my my assertion is that it is. Basically, it is a shadow of itself. And I'm not talking about just on forums like GLP and Above Top Secret and on Reddit forums, although I'm going to look at most of those. I mean, ufology out there in the public is dead. It's a dead subject. And yes, you'll still find it on the Discovery Channel, and you'll find it on the Science Channel, and I'm sure that every month, every year, there are going to be programs as people try to repackage it for public consumption. But the actual interest in UFOs, the public mind seeking these things out in not only entertainment and in documentary form, I think that's dead. I think it's gone, and I think there are several reasons for that. One of which is the technology we have today. We are bombarded with technology that we could only dream of 30 years ago. I mean, we all carry high definition video recording devices in our pockets, cell phones. We carry incredible audio recording devices around with us in the cell phones. And we have every manner of technology at home to analyze those recordings, those pictures, those audio recordings that in the past would have been, they would have been of the quality that you could excuse why there wasn't hard, concrete evidence of alien visitors, or at least proof that UFOs are anything more than misidentified natural weather phenomena. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at a couple of articles online that'll set the stage for what I'm alleging, that ufology is dead. And then we'll go in and look at some Reddit posts, and we'll look at what people say on the internet when they've got time to type out the responses. And I think we'll find that yes, ufology and even the interest in UFOs, it's had its day, and that day has come and gone. So let's take a look first at an article in the British tabloid The Guardian. And it's titled, "What is Behind the Decline in UFO Sightings?" Now, this is from September of 2018, so it's rather recent. And let's take a look at what this published article says. I'm not going to read through the entire thing, but we're going to get the gist of it. And the caption, the byline under the main title is, "In an age of wild claims churned out by politicians, media, and advertisers, perhaps people don't care as much anymore." Okay, so let's scroll down. We've got the classic 1950s, 1960s UFO image that, started the whole craze back in the day. And you have your black and white, you have your lighting that back in the day, it would have been impossible for the average person at home to analyze this in any fashion. And let's go down. And first paragraph, "This month, the two major online sites for reporting UFOs, the National UFO Reporting Center and the Mutual UFO Network, both documented steep drops in worldwide sightings. The decline started around 2014 when reports were at a peak. They have since reduced drastically to 55% of that year's combined total. Many UFO interest groups have folded, and numerous previously classified government documents have been disclosed." Okay, so what they're saying right off the bat is that this thing seems to have peaked in 2014. Now, I found that surprising because we were well into the cell phone age in 2014. So I would have guessed it had declined before that, but let's read on. They're asking if these declines reveal that UFO interest is becoming a blip on the human cultural radar. And that's exactly what I'm asserting, by the way. Let's read on. "Possible answers as to why sightings are decreasing are varied. A key factor, however, may be that more people simply don't care anymore. As we are accustomed to being inundated with wild claims churned out by politicians, media, and advertisers, the next report of a UFO is no more believed than the long-range weather forecast. And, well, they're making the point, as they did at the very beginning, that it's because we're bombarded by so much information. But I think that's the small part of it. I think they're going to get to the bigger point here. Let's read on. Before home video, photographs were the staple of UFO evidence. Video evidence during the height of the 1990s UFO mania was regarded by many as even more substantial. Amateur footage of glowing objects in the sky, as mysterious as they seemed real, made the cut for appearing on television. They were meant to be taken seriously, and they fed an audience hungry for amazement, helped by a healthy dose of conspiracy theorizing. Now, here they're making the link between conspiracy theory, and this is exactly right. From my point of view, the 1990s took ufology more prominent by associating it with conspiracy theory. And you had everybody, like Art Bell, you had a bunch of radio hosts that I'm sure other people are more familiar with them that came before Art Bell. You had the one that's still brought up today, Bill Cooper, who had a radio show for quite a while and was deep into the conspiracy aspect of UFO lore. Now, that was the radio side of it, but that's when also the interest on TV started to pop up, and the TV documentaries started to pop up, and Fox produced the X-Files and other material. It started to reach its cultural height at that time in the 90s. Now, let's read on. According to the cultural historian Stuart Walton, belief in UFOs is definitely in a state of decline, along with much else that could be classed as paranormal. Part of the reason is that the technology for providing documentary evidence of such matters is now widely available to everybody with a smartphone, and such purported evidence as there is on YouTube looks extremely threadbare. Now there's what I've highlighted as the primary reason I'm going to give for the death of ufology. It's that, we're carrying all this technology. People would have said in the past, even 20 years ago, well, the reason we don't have proof of UFOs is because, it's impossible. You're driving down the road and you see something, and maybe there's a disc floating across the sky and you can clearly see it, or a big black triangle with, alien looking lights on it. And wouldn't you know it, you just didn't have time to grab that camera. You weren't carrying a camera. And by the time you did grab a camera that you just happened to be carrying, it was out of focus. Oh, the car was moving. Oh, I didn't have time. The film wasn't ready. There are so many, even if you were carrying a video camera for some purpose, most people weren't, but even if you were, you could easily say, well, you jumped out of the car and turned it on, and by the time you could get it pointed in the right direction, the object had moved out of range. And you saw that a lot. You had videos where people had targeted what they claimed was a UFO, that they claimed had all this alienness to it, and yet you just saw blurry light. And again, they said, well, the camera that you're carrying, the lens just couldn't handle focusing on something so distant, or the lighting conditions were too poor, or the aperture of the camera wasn't suited for it. And so you always had an element of doubt there with the technology, where you could still trust somebody's eyewitness account, and the more passionate the better, because whatever equipment they carried that could have documented it was acceptable to produce some grainy, blurry footage. It was very acceptable to do that. People were used to that. But today it won't cut it. You can't say, hey, I saw a UFO floating across my house last night and I snapped this photo of it, and then when you show everybody the photo, it's just a blurry blob and you can't even tell where the hell your camera is pointed to, if it's even the sky. And that won't cut it today. Now, that would have cut it back in the 80s and even into the early 90s, but that just won't cut it today, because people want to know why your UFO picture, your UFO video is all grainy and shaky and blurry, when people have time to whip out their cell phone and record their cats doing the craziest things. You have somebody that's going to drive down the road, see something crazy, see some crazy accident footage, and get that on a cell phone despite all the carnage going on, and it's on YouTube and it's completely clear, maybe shaky, but completely clear, even in the bad light. But yet when it comes to UFOs, all of a sudden it's this grainy, blurry footage, and it's just a dot in the distance of a sea of static, and you can't see anything. And here they're making that argument too about how the military is actually making it worse, because when the government, namely the Air Force, has been recently releasing footage from what would have been previously classified targeting cameras, okay, and they say, well, hey, we're going to release this UFO sighting footage that we have. Well, they're making it worse because their videos are just as grainy and blurry as something that was shot by the guy down the street. And even though it has fancy targeting captions on it, and it says it's classified, and it's got the pilots to back it up and tell you how they maneuvered these classified camera systems into place to track this mysterious object, but yet the footage is all grainy and blurry and could be just about any damn thing. And probably is. It's the military footage I've seen could have easily been just a glitch in the system. It could have been static. It could have been the computer processing equipment taking some static anomaly and trying to make it into an object in the targeting display. There's an endless amount of possibilities, but my point is, even the government footage being released is making this thing worse as far as believability. Because again, here you have Air Force and Navy footage, and the government going out there and actually promoting it, and you're getting something that looks worse than this 1950s, 1960 black and white footage. I mean, this picture here, right here in front of us on the screen, is of better quality than what the Air Force is releasing now, claiming it's UFO footage. So it's really destroying the public's interest in this type of thing. Now here's an interesting article, particularly because it's written by a hardcore UFOlogy researcher, a ufologist. Nick Redfern is well known amongst ufologists. He's been on every program. He's been in many documentaries. He's published articles, of which this is one of them. And if anybody is going to be believable in writing an article on the possibility or probability that ufology is a dying subject, it would be Nick Redfern. Now, this article was written in 2015, and it's published on Mysterious Universe. And I can just read a little bit of it to show you what his thinking is. Nick Redfern writes, in a new article titled UFOlogy Entering Its Dark Ages, Rich Reynolds makes interesting observations on the current condition of ufology and what the future may bring for the subject. As Rich notes at his UFO Conjectures blog, several UFO enthusiasts besides me are speculating that ufology is kaput, down and out. That isn't exactly the case, but the impression that ufology is dead or dying is palpable. The Roswell Slides debacle has created a nadir in UFO interest for UFO aficionados. Now, by Roswell Slides, he's referring to, at the time, what would have been the newest UFO point of interest in research to turn out to be a hoax or not what it was cracked up to be. And this has happened many times in ufology, where you'll get like the Roswell alien autopsy film, or pictures of what people called Skinny Bob, an alien video of a supposed alien. Now, every time one of these things comes along and it pops up, I mean, sometimes it goes on for a year or two before somebody admits they created this for the purpose of a hoax, or somebody admits it was an exercise in applying CGI, or just enough facts come out about the material that it loses all its credibility. So that's what he's referring to there. But let's read on. He says, it's important to note that when it comes to the world of paranormal in general, trends and topics come and go, as does interest and attendant research into those same trends and topics. That has always been the case and probably always will be. Seances, table rapping, and ectoplasm were all the rage a century ago. The Bermuda Triangle was a big subject in the 1970s. Crop circles by the early 1990s were major news. Today, none of those controversies attract the huge attention they once did, and he's 100% right on that. What he says here is another major point that I'm trying to make, in that these are fads that come and go. And as he says, in the 70s, even into the early 80s, the Bermuda Triangle was all the rage. You saw it in documentaries, you saw it in movies and fictional accounts. It was all over the place. And you saw the same thing in the 1990s about crop circles. And you saw even in the 1990s, it went from crop circles to alien abductions. And then, you know, these were phases that came and went. And almost every one of these is kind of passed out of popularity. I mean, you don't see movies anymore, fictional or documentary, that have anything to do with crop circles or anything at all about the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, these things are like considered boring today. Hollywood directors don't even have interest in scripts that involve these things. So they're making that point. And also, remember, this is 2015. Okay, so we're in 2019. So there's probably more to it now that has further fell out of fashion. For example, the 2012 phenomenon, which is mentioned down here. And so they mention alien abduction is no longer the crowd puller, and it's not. I mean, there were books, there were big books written in the 1990s about alien abduction. You had John Mack, the psychologist, even bringing the psychology discipline into the fold, making quite a stir about that side of it, interviewing abductees, excuse me. But nowadays, it's a dead subject. Nobody's interested in it, and only obscure books are written about it. I mean, even on forums, as I'm going to show you, these topics have all but died out and have been replaced even with the current political talk of the day. So let's read on here. As an example, over at my World of Whatever blog, the 10 most popular of the currently 1,000 posts include A, one on the MJ-12 documents, controversial papers on the events at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, B, one on the alleged UFO crash at Aztec, New Mexico in March 1948, and C, one on the Lonnie Zamora Socorro UFO landing of 1964, and D, no less than 3 articles on the fiasco known as the Roswell slides. In other words, in terms of popularity at least, it's all about the past. Okay, maybe that's slightly generalizing, but you get the point. So what he's saying is, people are more interested in digging back into stories from the 1960s and 70s than they are about reports that are being generated today. And I think that again goes back to the technology. Would you trust a report today that had fantastic claims and even several witnesses at the scene, but yet there was no cell phone video, there were no photos, there were no even audio recordings to back this up other than blurry dots of light? No, you wouldn't. But would you go back and trust a report from the 60s and 70s that might make similar claims, but you could excuse the lack of video and photographic evidence? Or there would be more of a palpable reason why this wouldn't be a red flag to just dismiss further research into the story. And I think that's the point. Maybe both stories, the one from the 1970s and the hypothetical one from today, would be equally as valid as far as, you know, should they be investigated. But the one that's set in the time period where you couldn't just immediately dismiss it by unexplainable lack of technological evidence, okay, the one from the 70s you might actually spend more time researching, because you can't just, or your readers couldn't just dismiss it out of hand by saying, well, how come he didn't have cell footage of the thing passing over his pickup truck or whatnot? Whereas today, that would be the first the first thing that people would say, well, okay, this guy says he saw something on the highway. Why didn't he take any kind of shot of it with his cell phone? So it would be dismissed right away. So if you were writing a book, if you expected to generate interest in the subject that you're writing about, you would pick the cases from long ago rather than pick a case from today. Because the case from today, you have much more of an uphill battle just fighting off the detractors asking why there was no cell phone video. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at another reason that ufology, I believe, is dead or close to dead nowadays. And here you have an obituary, quite a lengthy obituary from the New York Times on Stanton T. Friedman, who is a famous ufologist, an actual scientist who spent his entire adult life tracking UFOs, collecting reports of them, investigating what he could. He died at age 84 in, I believe it was May 13th of 2019. Now, the thing about this is, it isn't just that Stanton Friedman died. It's that all of the ufologists of his era, the ones that made this popular in the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s, they're mostly all gone. They're either mostly all gone or they're close to being gone. And so they're no longer around to keep the actual interest in this going and to keep the old cases alive. Now, the reason you'll see the reason that I'm saying Stanton Friedman is a good example of this, well, obviously you can see how large the write-up for him was in the New York Times. Even his death generated quite a write-up in the New York Times. I mean, if he were just your fly-by-night UFO researcher, why would there be all of this obituary for him in the New York Times? There wouldn't be, because this guy was important to ufology. I mean, valid or not as a discipline or as a research subject, without this man, Stanton T. Friedman, and others like him, ufology wouldn't have even have become popular. I mean, you wouldn't have had shows in the 90s like the X-Files. We wouldn't have heard about the cases, the old classic cases like Betty and Barney Hill. These things were made by people like Stanton T. Friedman. And as an example, even the Roswell, what is now the Roswell lore, that wouldn't exist without, in particular, Stanton T. Friedman and others. So that's another reason I think it's dead, is because the people that were the pioneers of this are pretty much dead. I mean, to put it bluntly. So now let's take a look at a thread. Let's take a look at a couple of threads I pulled up on Reddit. And this one's even got the title that I chose for the subject, which is UFOlogy Dead? I think our generation will see the death of all this. We've been so well indoctrinated that even the smartest people in society are led to think that this is all nonsense. Okay, this original post on Reddit is asking the question. It's not really, he or she is not backing it up with anything here, but this is an archive thread, and it's got a lot of response, and it's from, it is from 3 years ago, but I think it asked the question, and more importantly, it's got responses that I want to get into here to show that what other people think about ufology and what has become of it. Now remember, this is 3 years ago, but I think it's even more relevant today. Now the first response I'll read off. By virtue of the fact that you posted about the subject only increases the SEO level of the subject online, making it more relevant. You're talking about UFOs causes the subject to increase the trending level. The internet is a hive community, that's why there is no such thing as bad press. Only more info will surface and the chaff will fall to the wayside. As all things do, once brought to the light, it will grow. It's not dead. It's leaving its first seeds of truth. That's the only way we will know what's really going on. Now, this response by somebody that's saying they're an abductee, I would expect this response. I mean, it is a belief for a lot of people that UFOs are alien visitors. I mean, they're not willing to entertain that it's about anything else. They specifically believe UFOs are alien visitors to the Earth or extraterrestrial. So they're going to respond that there's no such thing as bad press and that yes, it's dying out, but it's only going to have a rebirth. Well, perhaps or perhaps not. But you see, the believers, they're not going to lose their grip on their belief because for them it has become a religion. And I'm not saying they're wrong. Perhaps they're right what they believe, but it's still to them a religion. Um, Here's another response. Of course it's dead because there are no aliens near us. Because if there were, we would have seen them. Not some guy claiming to have seen them in the forest, but the whole world seeing them land somewhere. Also, can you magic believers stop calling people who don't believe in it indoctrinated? Go indoctrinate yourself with a book on astronomy and mathematical probability. Okay, there's a response from the other side. It's dead because there isn't any evidence. It's dead because you can't have something as a serious, even semi-scientific research project if it's nothing more than a belief. There has to be something there. There has to be some kind of evidence. Where is the cell phone video? Where is the clear photography? Where are the photographs from multiple people around the world that would show the same types of things? There aren't. And so he's saying, of course, it's dead. You'll have some argument. Yes, there's another post saying, don't despair. I think there's still interest in UFOs. Well, yeah, there's still interest in it, but it's a shadow of its former self. It's culturally dead. And in fact, I should probably restate my belief that it's dead by being more specific and saying it's culturally dead. Now, this poster's saying it's just overexposed. I don't think it's overexposed. I think it's culturally dead is more accurate because if anything, it was overexposed 15 years ago, closer to its peak. But he's asking a valid question here. How many ufologists do we really need? Okay. And I think that's a question I would ask too, because what qualifies somebody as a ufologist? Now, if you said only the serious researchers with actual real scientific credentials like Stanton Friedman can be considered ufologists, then there really weren't that many to begin with. But it seems over the years, almost anybody, including myself, that wanted to put time and money into it could consider themselves a ufologist. Anybody that could especially draw crowds at panels at conventions, they would be considered a ufologist. And I think that's the standard today too. Now, I don't know if you call that overexposure, but if you want to say that all it takes to become a ufologist is to make a name for yourself at conferences, then yeah, there's way too many ufologists. No question about that. So from that point, I 100% agree. Ufology has come a ways now, with some pilots willing to talk about things they say and not get immediately fired like they did in the past. There is still an issue of coming forward that keeps a lot of good information underground. I think at one time that was the case, that reporting a UFO sighting as a pilot, you're a pilot from an airline and you make an official report within your airline or to the FAA that you saw something that you consider a UFO, or that's what it sounds like you're saying. I think more than 30 years ago, that would have been a career killer, but I don't think so now. I think it wouldn't hurt you in the slightest today. It might even make you more popular amongst your peers. I mean, that could also be a sign of the subject being overexposed. Here's another post. Definitely not. The smartest people are the ones who don't think this is nonsense and who seek to inform and educate themselves outside the boundaries of federally funded and controlled universities, etc. I think that that doesn't mean it's not dead. I think it's still dead, and I do agree with the poster that the smarter people are the ones that keep asking questions, but culturally, I think it is dead. Here's a good point here. This poster says, anything mysterious creates a bandwagon of greedy enthusiasts who will squeeze what they can from it. This has been proven over and over again since the beginning of the first cognitive thoughts. Okay, exactly. This is another point. This is another reason I want to put in my argument that ufology is culturally dead, and that is, it's been milked to death by people to make money. And that includes the people calling themselves ufologists and hosting panels at conventions. That includes authors writing books with all degrees of knowledge involved. You know, you have people writing books on the subject that it's complete fiction and they admit it. There are others writing books purporting to be research where they interviewed people that give them the stories. And it's just been milked to death. And people have proven that they'll not just write stories and publish stories, but they'll go above and beyond creating fake video and etc. to make a buck. And you know, that's become even greater in the internet age with whole YouTube channels devoted to fake, what are obviously fake UFO videos, or misidentified would be a nice way of saying it, misidentified objects purported as alien craft. That I'm trying to be nice there, of course. Here's another nice response. I think ufology is spread too thin and just needs to cull the internal weeds. Here's my 5-point manifesto to move ufology forward. Well, a manifesto is sometimes needed, so let's take a look at it. Number one, lights moving around in the distant. Number one, lights moving around in the distant sky need to go, i.e. anything orbish. I just don't see the point, and I don't care anymore. If it doesn't show clear structure to the object, then it really could be anything and should be ignored. Okay, bravo. Number one, I believe wholeheartedly. People are tired of seeing point lights floating around in a zoomed out, over zoomed out video. Okay, just because your video camera has 200 times digital zoom, it doesn't mean we want to see a pixel of light floating out there in a sea of other blurry square artifacts. Okay, so I think number one is dead on. Number two, anything of vintage which has black and white photos is like beating a dead horse and needs to be put to rest inside the historical box. Nothing more can be gained from these cases. I can't tell you the number of UFO presentations where someone pulls out the black and white images and you can almost feel the internal groan in the room from everyone under the age of 40. Okay, number two is also dead on. I'm over the age of 40. Okay, and I remember when I was a kid in the early 70s, and I looked into books that talked about the subject of UFOs, and what did I see? Black and white photos from the 50s and 60s, and black and white frames from film video taken in the 50s and 60s. And so, yeah, we've all seen it. We've all seen the same material over and over and over, and I can only imagine what a millennial will think, or a Generation Z, so to speak, set of eyes will see when they're used to high definition video being fed to them on demand, and somebody wants them to go back and look at old, grainy black and whites from 1962. That's just not going to cut it. So I agree 100%. Now, number three, clear provenance. By that, I mean someone human needs to put their hand up and say, it was me behind this evidence, not XYZ69 username on YouTube. Okay, good, valid point. There needs to be provenance of evidence. There needs to be what you'll see in court called the chain of custody. Without that, you can't even begin to consider evidence. Okay, so I agree. Number four, start whitelisting instead of blacklisting. I will listen to any evidence, but cases need to prove themselves rather than get automatic legitimacy off the bat. Okay, that's where you go into, again, your YouTube channels. People just saying, well, if there's a video on a certain YouTube channel that I won't mention, it must be right because, the owner of the channel says that he only puts up stuff that he has confidence in. Well, that's not good enough. You need something more than that to just give everything the benefit of the doubt, okay, especially in the internet age. So I agree. Number five, known cases of fraud of any kind need to be expunged entirely. I have personally wasted far too much time researching cases only to find out that obvious untruths about a case have been conveniently left out for entertainment's sake. In this regard, the skeptic community does a far better job. Okay, number 5 is also a good point. People keep bringing up and referencing the same old cases that have been debunked and proven to be frauds or to have been completely erroneous years ago, and they keep getting referenced and brought back up and brought back up in the entertainment medium. And people sometimes do this deliberately to try to prop up their own material they're coming out with, to be, to put a new spin on something. But a lot of times it's just that there's so much prior stuff out there that's already been cataloged online and found to be fraudulent that it's hard for one person that's not deeply into the subject to actually know that that was already debunked long ago. And so it's just an innocent case of somebody referencing something without knowing themselves that, hey, that's completely bogus. But, they just don't know that it has been proven to be bogus. So, okay, those were all good points. I like that post. It was a 3-year-old post. But, he ends with, overall, everyone in ufology just needs to raise their filter, and as Steyer said, police those within the community who believe anything which comes along for the good of the whole. In other words, the ufologists need to police themselves. And I think they do, but there's only so much they can do. Again, everyone who wants to be a ufologist is calling themselves a ufologist. So how many of them actually have the skills or the credentials or the standing to go and tell their peers that they're full of crap? Not too many. And even if they do, they're all competing for the same panels and the same book exposure and etc. at the same conventions. So it's kind of hard, even though this guy that is putting out crap and you can prove it, you're not going to rush over and tell all his fans he's full of crap, because he's going to send his fans over to you to do the same. So, it's another case of these people ufologists aren't necessarily scientists with credentials, so they have no actual standing to criticize each other. So it's, even if they wanted to police each other, they just don't have the ability to do so. At least not in public. So here's another post here. With the advances of CGI and editing software and now drones, it is increasingly obvious that the number of sightings have to be considered as fake as an ever-increasing number. This does not, however, mean that all sightings are fake, as some would have you believe. There is a vested interest coming from either the government or the tech sector in this country to conceal the relationship with aliens exploring our planet. Now, I find this post interesting because at the same time he's making my point that the advances in CGI, software, and technology have made it harder to present what would be considered evidence. He's also at the same time saying that, aliens exist and there's a government conspiracy to cover it up. So I agree in one regard, but at the same time, he's way out there just throwing it out that, he's still a believer at the same time. So you get that too. You get people that are still believers, even though they acknowledge that, yeah, how come nobody's got any cell phone footage? How come nobody's got pictures from all around the world that corroborate? Of course, they still want to believe, and they admit they still believe, which is fine. Here's another post. No, if anything, it's growing. No, I don't agree on that. Anyway, let's continue. I find that if you're not fucking weird and forceful about the subject, people will actually consider it. Of course, don't trust anyone over 30. That's a joke. I find that using good old logic to assert certain things, people will consider it. Yeah, if you assert it enough and you're passionate enough about what you're reporting, yeah, people will. A percentage of people will at least make some effort to investigate it or entertain it. But I think he's dead wrong that it's growing. it is not growing. It's either flatlined or it may actually be declining online and in the rest of our culture. That's why I say it's culturally dead, at least at this point in time. Um, I believe that our generation will actually bear witness to the governments acknowledging that there is life in different planets. It's just impossible that we're alone. It might not be a UFO, but it'll confirm alien life and by extension UFOs, unless UFOs show up on the White House doorsteps. Okay, so there are a lot of people like this that believe that the government is going to do some kind of disclosure. And they keep using the word disclosure. Now, they're not using it here. This is a post from 3 years ago. But you'll see new posts and people, people with radio shows now on the air, they keep using the word disclosure, like they think, oh, the Air Force is going to finally give us disclosure. It's like their new buzzword where they think somehow the government over a period of time, whether gently or abruptly, is going to come clean with what they know. Well, it's my contention that they don't really know anything, at least not as far as, are UFOs alien craft or from another dimension, or they're not from Earth. I don't think there's any government agency that really knows or cares to spend time to know, because they don't know any more than us. Their five senses work just like mine. Their five senses, it doesn't matter what their rank in the Navy is or what their observational skills are or what their training is. Their five senses, no matter what equipment they look at, are only as good as mine. So short of aliens like announcing themselves publicly in multiple places to government officials and in view of the public, no one's going to know anything, including the government. I mean, maybe there are aliens, maybe everything is true, maybe there's an armada of massive city-sized ships floating over us right now, but unless they want to announce themselves, there's nobody in the government more qualified to know than the average person. I mean, I don't think they know a damn thing, because whatever's really going on, if there is something going on, the government, I think, long ago determined that it's a waste of resources to go anywhere with it, other than to maybe use it for propaganda purposes, to cover up other classified programs, to screw with our political enemies in other countries. But no, I don't think the government's got anything to tell us, really. Nothing that we believe in any case. And that's another point I'd like to make while we're here, is that even if the government wanted to disclose something, as they say nowadays, what would be the burden of evidence people would consider? I mean, already the way politics work now in the U.S. and in other Western countries, it's already difficult for the government to convince people of anything. I mean, the government has unlimited resources to prove to us that global warming is a threat. And yet, half or more of the population doesn't want to go along with the program. Now, I'm not saying global warming is real or not. Man-made climate change could be completely wrong, or it could be true. But regardless, they can't even get the public on board with something like that. So what level of disclosure would be required to get people on board thinking that UFOs exist and the government's been in contact with them? I mean, I can almost guarantee that the largest chunk of the public would demand immediate proof. And if there was nothing but some grainy video, no one would go along with it. And even short of some kind of alien life form being introduced on television all at once and the government backing it up and having press conferences, even this, you'd be hard pressed to get the bulk of the population to go along with it. It would take quite a while, even in your face in that fashion. And we're just talking the United States, much less the rest of the world. So I think the burden of proof would be too high even for the government if they should wish to disclose such a thing. And it doesn't seem to me like they're capable of doing so, even in the tiniest fashion at this point. So let's look at another post. The major thing causing people to think ufology is horseshit are the gullible true believers within the UFO enthusiast community. There has been so much hoaxing, so many crazy contact claimants, obvious delusional thinking, and general stupidity that of course objective outsiders roll their eyes. Given the appearance of most outspoken UFO enthusiasts, it is not surprising at all to see it dismissed. Okay, now that I think is an incredibly valid point. Um, it's not an ordinary person that usually comes forward from an ordinary walk of life with an ordinary appearance that presents information that they've been in contact with UFOs or with aliens or that they know something about it. It's always somebody that is not considered normal, that wouldn't pass for normal upon the most cursory examination. And so that has really put a serious damper on the public's interest in taking UFOs seriously. Because, I mean, look at my previous video on Zeta Talk and Nancy Leader. For every regular person claiming that they swear they saw what appeared to be a gray alien appear, at their campsite, and no matter how credible they are, for every normal person claiming something like that, there's 100 Nancy leaders saying they've had telepathic thoughts their whole life, there are cataclysms coming, or etc. Something other outlandish claim to go along with the fact that they're claiming knowledge of UFOs or aliens. So for every regular, normal-seeming person, there's 100 Nancy leaders, there's 100 cult leaders, there's 100 Marshall Applewhite, I think his name was, the leader of Heaven's Gate in Southern California, San Diego area, many years ago. There's too many of those. There are too many of those, and not enough people that will come across as normal to the public. It doesn't help that guys like Stanton Friedman that were not UFO crazies, but actually put effort into researching it on a scientific basis and had the credentials, that they've all but largely passed away. It doesn't help that the generation after them are largely conspiracy theorists on top of being ufologists. So, okay, we've gotten everything out of this Reddit thread I think I wanted to go over, and so let's look at one more. Now this one's a lot more extensive, and I'm not even going to try to read into it very far, but it's posted. The subject is, "No one ever gets angry when I tell them I no longer believe in UFOs." And then in parentheses, very long, but from the heart. And it is very long, and it is from the heart. And it's a fascinating read. It was posted 4 years ago on Reddit. And basically, it's somebody that was a believer and had a high interest in UFOs. And he goes on a very long essay, very well thought out and well constructed essay on why he's no longer a believer, and in fact openly will tell people that he has no interest and could care less about it. And I find that I have a lot in common with him. When I was younger, in my 20s, I was deep into researching the topic, and not just UFOs, but different paranormal subjects, and the cross-pollination between them. Are there entities outside of our normal realm? Are there interdimensional beings slash aliens slash maybe entities from another plane of existence? Are they interacting with us? And I was deeply into that, and I was deeply into all the thought and research that people put into the big UFO conspiracy research of the 90s in particular, and the abduction phenomenon. I read a lot about that too. And like this poster, I've just completely given up on it, because I've spent most of my adult life looking at this in one regard or another, and I've yet to see one, as I said before, I've yet to see one good high-definition cell phone video of a UFO craft that wasn't CGI, or of its occupants that wasn't CGI, but I've seen endless high-definition car crashes, high-definition cat videos where cats are walking around on two legs, and I mean the craziest things you can catch on a cell phone, dug out of somebody's pocket. But yet, all these UFO sightings and all these fantastic claims and all these millions of high definition cameras in people's pockets at this point, with the ability to live stream it and shoot it all around the earth, and we have nothing. We still have grainy photos, we still have overexposed photos, we still have videos that show nothing but lights in an overzoomed field of view. And that's my thing on it. I could go on for pages about it, but a lot of it also is the media. The media has oversold it. I wouldn't say it's oversaturated, but it's oversold it in Hollywood format. Things that were considered fantastical and, what if scenarios for science fiction. Well, a lot of that's come to pass, but the alien parts haven't. So a lot of hypotheticals from 30 years ago have actually come true today, but the alien parts never showed up. And so, that has a psychological impact where you're just not willing to entertain it. I would be more willing to entertain the wildest parts of a cyberpunk fantasy show on Netflix than I would about aliens showing up. In fact, if aliens were in such a show, I would find that the most, incredible part of it, not the rest of the technology, because I've seen the rest of the stuff coming in one shape or another in my real world experiences. But the alien part is still completely mythic, fictional. It might as well be fairies. And so let's read a response to that massive thread, a massive initial post, which was a great post, by the way. That was a real treat to read. You and I share several parallels, actually. Here is a post I made a year ago with similar themes. Well, let's go ahead and click on that real quick and give him some credit, if it'll load up here. Okay, and it finally loaded. It's titled "Why I'll Never Reveal I'm an Atheist to My Family," and I think he's coming at the same topic as the original poster. But you might want to check it out if you're on Reddit. And it was posted by Agnostic Atheist 6 years ago. Okay, so it predates this other article we're discussing. So let's go back to that. I used to be deeply involved in Bigfoot culture. I personally know many of the various TV personalities you see. I've been on numerous expeditions, campouts, stakeouts. If you knew the amount of money I've spent on FLIR cameras and night vision and game cameras, you'd cry. I've even seen a Bigfoot twice in person. But as time has gone on, the reality of Bigfoot has become progressively dimmer, in the same way UFOs did for you. I can look back now and see those were bears that I saw. I'll give you this. I think I can tell you what your contacts in the UFO world stood to gain. Attention. Pure attention. Not the kind of attention that would shake their lives up, but a few people hanging on their every word in a small corner of the internet was enough. And that's not to say they lied, but they wanted to believe, and for you to believe them. When I saw a Bigfoot on one of my expeditions, I was the center of attention and became the expert of the trip because everybody wanted to talk to me. Being sure of something is a tricky thing. I've come to realize everything, even your own personal evidence, must be constantly evaluated, because information isn't reviewed, can only be believed, and believing is the path to faith. Okay, so what he's saying is, in the same regards that the original poster gave up on ufology, he gave up on Bigfoot research, and he was really into it. And again, because he realized he wanted to believe, he enjoyed the attention, and he made himself believe. He made himself believe that bears that he saw were Bigfoot creatures. So I can't really fit that in as a reason why ufology has declined, other than to say that on an individual level, people have been saturated with it, have grown older, and the people that, like myself, were really into it in our 20s and 30s are now older, and we're just, I don't know, jaded, for an oversimplified word of it, and we've moved on to other things. Here's a post. My husband and I were talking about this exact thing earlier this week. I am 32 now, and when I was maybe 11 or 12, my sister and I would glue ourselves in front of the TV Saturday nights to watch unsolved mysteries and sightings. I remember for some years I was honestly fearful when I would see lights in the sky at night and would have to be absolutely convinced it was an airplane before I could relax. Okay, now this post goes on to talk about, you know, how they were very into it when they were younger. And then it concludes with, looking back now, I am pretty sure what I think I remember happening was somewhat made up in my own mind, and I was okay lying to myself so I could have a story too. It kind of put me in a special club, and I felt special. I would say I never believed in ghosts until I experienced that, but I still wondered if my mind had played tricks on me or I imagined something more than what happened. I have accepted that as real as I felt that experience was, it wasn't a ghost, and I fooled myself because I really wanted to believe it. And again, that's making the same post that was made, or same point that was made in the prior post up above it, was that you want to believe, so your mind believes. You know, it's like that poster in the X-Files. I want to believe. Well, that's the most dangerous thing for research, is you want to believe. You're going to, of course, find what you believe. Let's see if we can find anything to back up my point that ufology is actually culturally dead. I see that people are in agreement that, well, here's one here. Aliens are purported to be highly advanced technologically, flying around in inertialess crafts, stopping car ignitions from afar, etc. Maybe it's just easier for them to disturb digital cameras than influence the purely analog photochemical process. So here's actually what I believe is a small touch upon the conspiracy that's out there now. When people like myself say, where are all the cell phone videos and etc. that would have evidence of UFOs? And they come back with, well, somehow the aliens are able to interfere with our technology so that we can't get evidence of them. But again, you'd have to wonder, well, now you're using a conspiracy theory to try to explain lack of evidence. And you'd also have to explain, why would these super advanced aliens care whether we photograph them or not? I mean, it doesn't. If they are that far more advanced than us, obviously, from what's been reported, we're not capable of interfering with them anyway, if even half the reports are true. So why would they give a crap what we photographed? In other words, why would the ants in an anthill care? Why would, I care if the ants crawling around on an anthill, noticed I was there? Well, I wouldn't, and I don't, because they have no effect on me, and I don't care about them. So if I pull out my cell phone and take a picture of them or hover real close to them, would I care if they noticed? No, I wouldn't. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So let's read another post. Came here from R. Best of. Reddit does love to exalt atheism as the most intellectual logical choice, which I don't mind most times, but I have to point out some real inconsistencies in your post. I'm a Christian, so maybe I can shed a little light on some of your claims from a different perspective. Okay, so here's the religious angle. This is in an atheism forum called True Atheism, so we're getting some of the pushback on that. But that doesn't suit our purposes here. Here's a post, weak tea, all smoke and no fire. Well, that sums it up pretty well. You spend a lot of time circling the drain, writing for writing's sake, when you could just have made your basic point in a paragraph, which is, as far as I can tell, that because the exceedingly lofty expectations you formed as a teenager have not been met over the last 15 years or so, and then you draw the very commonly made parallel between mysticism and the religious belief system and the UFO phenomenon as if it was a novel original concept and not old hash. So what this poster is saying is they should have just said that their expectations as a youth haven't been met, so they've given up on the concept. But I think it's a lot more than that. I think the original poster was saying that you're going to have to come up with some kind of real hard, real world evidence that people can experience and they can corroborate with each other. Otherwise, your interest wanes. And this post continues on. The fact that aliens haven't landed on the White House lawn doesn't discredit the robust umbrella of phenomenon known collectively as UFOs. Furthermore, I refute the basic point you build your change of heart upon. There are more videos being produced than ever before documenting the UFO phenomenon. You seem to disregard this wholesale because something that would force the NBCs of the world to address the issues hasn't been produced. Okay, I disagree 100% with what this believer is saying, and it's definitely a believer. There are probably, depending on how you want to regard them, more videos than ever before documenting, people thinking they see something in the sky that's unexplainable, a UFO. But they're all crap. There's more crap than ever before, just like there's more YouTube videos than there ever were before. That's just the natural evolution. It doesn't mean that there's more evidence than there ever was before. The evidence is just as bad, if not worse, than it ever was, because now you've got CGI technology mixed in with the blurry photos that people just couldn't manage to take. So you've got even more hoax than before, more sensationalism and attention seeking than before, and it means nothing. It means nothing. There's actually less evidence than before because now you're trying to find a needle in an even bigger haystack of nonsense. And so this is a believer, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way that, belief is enough for some people. But we're not talking about belief. We're talking about why ufology is culturally dead. It's because even a belief needs something to nurture it. And ufology is not a belief. Ufology is purports to be like even a pseudoscience. The key word being science. There must be some kind of evidence to examine. And so ufology is dead, and UFO interest is culturally dead. And I stand by that point. Okay, and so I think that's enough Reddit, and see, we could move on to GLP, but it won't even be necessary. That's for another video. So closing that out, closing that out, closing that out. And what we're left here with is ufology a dying subject? No, ufology is a dead subject. And that this could be updated for, we're at July 1st, 2015. It should be updated for October 2019. Case closed. Put the tombstone out there. It's dead. So that's a wrap, guys. And I'll see you on the next lengthy diatribe that I put together. Over and out.